All right then. This week we're talking about just things that are a part of, I guess, what you'd call popular culture. That would be the big that would be the tag on the filing cabinet. Whether it's symbology and in many cases secret symbology all around us and in cinema, as we discussed yesterday, or if it's in the music business. Now, yesterday was mostly about movies and so forth, but this is about the music industry. And we're going to speak again with our guest and friend, Mark Devlin. Let me tell you a little bit about him in case you're new to Caravan. He's a UK-based club and radio DJ. He's a music journalist and an author specializing in R&B, soul, hip-hop, and other forms of black music. Since 1990, he's played gigs all over the UK and in 40 countries around the world. In 2010, he underwent what he refers to as a conscious awakening, sparking questions about the nature of reality, consciousness, our true selves, and who or what is really controlling most aspects of daily human life. His special area of interest was how this ties into the mainstream music industry and the way in which A-list artists are used to manipulate and mind control the masses in line with a much larger agenda. I mean, witness Rihanna saying F that S regarding religious freedom. This is what he's talking about. There is a much larger agenda. He now talks on radio and in person about these subjects and produces an ongoing series of related music and speech podcasts. The subject area encompasses lyrical content, production methods, recording frequencies, backmasking, predictive programming, the apparent use of mind control techniques on many A-list artists. Witness their behavior. The suggestion of industry ritual sacrifices and the occult symbolism now being routinely placed in music videos. And by the way, there's a big difference between me seeing you and the Illuminati eye watching you, man. Hey, Mark, how you doing? How's it going up there in the beautiful UK? Springtime over there. It's a pretty time of year, yeah.
Well, yeah, it's good to be back, John, and it's a beautiful day today. The sun is shining, which doesn't happen often in England. So, we count our blessings when we get a decent day.
Absolutely. We are always grateful for even small mercies. And so, for a while, it was, Paul is dead now, miss him, that thing. And, untimely death, that thing from Revolution 9 on the Ever Living White Album.
Well, yeah.
But now, it's not really so, it's not so subtle anymore, is it?
Well, it is and it isn't. I think when you learn to look for certain things, you see them occurring everywhere. So when you're made aware of what the agenda is and the tactics that are being used, you wonder how you ever missed it, because so much of it is blatant and in your face. But most people have never looked at the underlying influences in the music industry or in Hollywood movies, as you mentioned, or any other aspect of the entertainment business. So when you don't know what you're looking for, it's having an effect on you on a subliminal level, because everything is targeted at the subconscious mind. So what I'm trying to do with radio appearances such as this and public talks, and what many other researchers are trying to do with YouTube videos and books and any other method of getting the information out there, is making people aware of how their consciousness and their minds are being hijacked and manipulated, because people are shocked to realise that this is going on. Most people think they're real smart. Most people think that they can't be got in that way. They're too clever. You can't get me like that. But it turns out that this is what's happening on a mass scale. And so it's very important to make people aware of these manipulations.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, the effects that music has on people. I remember there's a song going all the way back to, it was on 78, so I assume it was the 30s. And I don't know who played this song. I'm still looking for it from my dad's collection of old records. And it was called Gloomy Sunday. And apparently it was Artie Shaw or Dizzy Gillespie or one of them. But this thing depressed people so much that they were actually hurling themselves from, multi-story buildings and from, like the 10th floor. because about somebody that's just this love lost thing. So that's one thing. I mean, much like the people when Orson Welles did his War of the World thing, they were all going crazy, and some people even committed suicide over it.
Yeah.
So, but let me ask you this: what effects? I mean, really, like clearly detrimental effects on people who are worshipers of the music culture. Are you able to pick up or give us some ideas of what's happening to the aficionados now? We're getting sucked into all this Illuminati thing and ritual sacrifice and horns on their heads and this ghastly Lady Gaga, and all of that,
Well, what it comes down to is understanding the true nature of the entertainment business, and in this case the music industry, understanding who runs it, really. I mean, we all know about the corporations. We know that the big names, Sony and Universal and all these other big names. But it's getting down to the top of the pyramid, if you want to use that analogy, and looking at who is really pulling the strings of all these corporations and who's making all these things happen. And to put that in its true context, you need to have a full understanding of what's really going on in this world. And I'm sure many listeners to your show would not be surprised to hear that the world is nothing like we're told it is, and it's not run by the people we think it is. So the uninitiated might look at somebody like Barack Obama and they think he runs the United States. He doesn't. He's a puppet. He's a stooge. Same as David Cameron in the UK, same as all other world leaders. They are being directed and controlled by individuals working within certain collectives, certain groups, certain secret societies. And these groups are absolutely steeped in dark occultic practices and in Satanism. And I realise how shocking it is for people to hear that for the first time. But this is the truth, and this is something that we need to understand if we're to make any sense of what's going on in the world and what's going on at an individual level when you get down to something like the music industry. So there's a very deep-rooted agenda at work, and it is steeped in malevolent dark energy, and unfortunately it doesn't have humanity's best interests at heart. I realise that's inconvenient. I realise it's uncomfortable for people to come to terms with. I wish it was another way, but it's not, so we have to deal with it. And so my special area of interest over the years, or the last 5 years, has been looking at how this plays out in the music industry. And it's not as if they don't give you clues as to what's going on. And we can get into the reasons why they feel the need to do this as we progress, but they do give you indications of the fact that the main A-list artists in the music industry are under this control and are being used to further this agenda. And there are many ways in which you can spot it if you know what you're looking for. And for some reason, in recent years, they've really stepped up the agenda and they've started introducing this symbolism into music videos, into promotional press shots, into stage shows. And one way that it plays out, there are many, but we can start with this one, is some of the hand signals that you see artists striking up. And that might sound like a puzzling or ridiculous thing, but if you are being vigilant about it, you will have noticed that pretty much every A-list mainstream music artist in recent years has been putting their hands up in certain signs. I think we've got some examples, we've got some images to show what we're talking about here. One of them is Jay-Z, and anyone that's followed Jay-Z in recent years will have seen him striking up this hand signal that involves making a kind of triangular arrangement with your fingers. And the cover story for it is that it's the rock sign. It's said to be the rock sign, and it's a reference to Jay-Z's record label, which was initially called Rockefeller Records. There's a name to conjure with for anyone that knows what the Rockefeller bloodline is all about. These days it's called Rock Nation, but the idea is that this triangle is supposed to represent a diamond. That's what Jay-Z said in an interview that he gave in 2009 that was available on the internet, but I see it's now been removed. You can't get it anywhere. But he gave the cover story that we're representing the the rags to riches aspect of having made it big in the hip-hop game. So when you see this triangular thing, it's representing a diamond. It's celebrating life and celebrating having made it, you know. But when you get into the dark occult history of this symbol, or not necessarily dark occult, but occultic, because it's all about the intention that is placed on the symbol, you come to realise that it's actually known as a triangle of manifestation. And it represents the Trinity aspect of creation that's inherent everywhere. And in this instance, it's representing the unity of mind, body and spirit, or thoughts, emotions and actions. And the idea is that when you place this symbol over your left eye and you imbue your will and your intent into it, and you've got those three elements all balanced in unity, you can make manifest anything that you wish to bring into reality. So when you see Jay-Z doing this, and when you see him striking up this symbol at concerts and getting all the concert goers to do the same thing on demand, so that you've got maybe 10,000 people in an arena all striking up this triangle, you've got to ask yourself, what is the intention that has been put into that symbol? People really don't understand what they're connecting with energetically. And this all ties into the true nature of reality. You know, we could do a whole show on that, but I think, again, a lot of people listening to this show will understand that the nature of this reality, this realm of existence in which we find ourselves, is energetic. It's energetic constructs. It's energy vibrating at an endless array of different frequencies. And symbols carry energy and are representations of energy. And when you connect with a symbol in that way, in the apparently physical realm, you're making a connection on that energetic unseen level with whatever intention has been put into that symbol. And so if the creator of the symbol has a malevolent intent and, as I said, doesn't necessarily have humanity's best interests at heart, then you're connecting with something that you don't understand and which can be potentially harmful. So, you know, that's one example of it. Another sign and symbol that we see time and time again is the covering of one eye, or the highlighting of one eye in one way or another. You see artists covering an eye like this. You see them putting the hair down or the brim of a hat to cover one eye. You see pictures that are shaded so that one eye is shown and the other one is in the shadow. And in each case, it's drawing attention to the one eye. And as you alluded to earlier, there are connections here with the all-seeing eye image that we see on the back of the US dollar bill in the capstone of the pyramid. And it's also a reference to the all-seeing eye in its representation as the pineal gland, or the third eye, which is the connection to higher levels of consciousness within the very centre of the human brain. So we've got this one-eye symbolism going on as well. And I can guarantee you, anyone that's got a favourite singer, a favourite musician that's had a hit in the last 5 years, you are going to find a promotional picture of them somewhere online with them covering one of their eyes. Because they're all doing it on instruction. And it's another calling card of the forces that control the music industry. It's letting you know who owns these artists. And again, it's making an energetic connection with the subliminal mind of the viewing public. And it's all part of this, you know, network of secret societies that are really running the music industry. And the other one that I'll mention, the third example of the hand signal, is what's known as the horned hand, il mano cornuto, and various other connotations of it. I always find it difficult to do this, but it's something like that. And it can be either way round. And all these... I
thought that was just the University of Texas at Austin's, hook 'em horns deal.
Well, all these signs and symbols come with a cover story. Right. So the cover story for this one is that it's supposed to mean, I love you. And it's apparently part of a sign language that was invented by a woman called Helen Keller for deaf people. Yeah. Oh, and yes. the idea is that in there somewhere you've got a capital I, you've got a capital L, and you've got the U. And together they're supposed to be taken as I love you. So it's supposed to be a very innocent sort of symbol that people flash up to each other. But as I say, that is the cover story. And when you get into the history of it and the connotations of it, you realise that what's being evoked is a horned deity, a sort of malevolent demonic entity. Some researchers say that it's evoking Baphomet, this androgynous creation of Eliphas Levi in the 19th century, which is sort of half human, half goat, half male, half female. It's very much beloved of the Illuminati entertainment industry. They seem to revere this Baphomet entity quite a lot. Other researchers claim that it's a representation of Pan, the ancient pagan deity known as Pan, and others would claim that it's Moloch, which is one of the deities that you find at the rituals at Bohemian Grove that the rich and famous and politicians of this world attend each year. But whatever the case, it appears to be the fact that these artists are evoking this entity that is very much a part and parcel of the true nature of the industry. So it's not I Love You. I don't believe it is. You know, that's the cover. It's not the rock sign. There's something else going on here. There's subliminal communication of a very dark and satanic agenda, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was a kid, some of the, inevitably, I don't know, for some reason there were a lot of octogenarians around when I was a kid, neighbors and so forth. I mean, people say it's generally said that people live longer in this day and age. It's just not true. It's just not true. There have been old people over 100, people in their 90s. They're all in the neighborhood. And many of these old people, back when I was a child, listened to Helen Keller's broadcasts. I don't even know when she passed away. But and it was all about the Lord. It was about Christian faith and things like this. I never got Illuminati out of anything that Helen Keller had to say. Wasn't Pat Sullivan the one who rescued her from all that? Yeah, I think it was. But so we're not throwing Helen under the bus, are we? Are we saying that Helen Keller was part of this diabolical scheme, or are we saying her love sign got hijacked by the Illuminati?
Well, it's hard to say. It's certainly possible that it did get hijacked and that it set out with an innocent intent. People might say, on just having heard what I've put out there, you're reaching a bit. You know, you're reading so much into this. You're kind of seeing things that you want to see. And if we just take these hand signals in isolation, I can understand why people would think that. But, you know, we've got a lot of points ahead of us in this discussion, and I'm not basing my views as to the true nature of the entertainment business on just a few hand signals. You know, there are many other elements to what we need to look at to get a true appreciation of the agenda. And I would invite people to look at all of them and weigh them all up with an open mind, and then decide whether these symbols have an innocent sort of cover story or whether there's something more malevolent going on. You've got to look at the whole picture, as always.
You know, Mark, you must be right about this, because look at these ridiculous sums of money that are paid to these, in my opinion, extraordinarily mediocre artists. And also sports figures who are now starting to flash the Illuminati eyeball all over the place. And it makes you wonder, is this just some, to use a Texican expression, just some dumbass trend or fad, or are these people really hooked? But it appears that anytime there are vast sums of money involved, money making everything possible, you inevitably find the satanic component, which I think is hysterical. And I repeat for the audience that you may not believe in Christ, you may not believe in God, but the people that you're buying product from, they do. But they've made the decision to go the other way. They've made the decision to go away. And Scripture is full of this. It's like, no, I don't like God. I hate God. I want to go with the other guy. I mean, I saw a car today that said, I'm with Barack on there. And they were driving like crap as well. I'll toss that in as well. Carry on, Mark.
Well, if you're with Barack, who else are you with? That's the question.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? If you're not with me, I'll blow my horn and tell you to get on your way. Go on, bleep off. Get out of the way.
Well, yeah.
You shouldn't even be driving a car. If you're properly with Barack, you'd be walking, riding your bicycle, or taking public transportation.
Well, that's right. Yeah, it doesn't make a difference whether any one individual believes in the dark occult and believes in satanic practices and Luciferian practices. Doesn't make a difference. They do. And whether you do or not doesn't matter one jot to them. You could think it's total BS. Doesn't matter. It's truth is truth. Reality is reality. Truth goes on being truth, whether anyone believes it or not. One person in the world might believe it, or nobody might believe it, but it doesn't stop it being truth. It doesn't stop it being eternal and unchanging. And that's what we're dealing with here. And when it comes to the entertainment business, yeah, you're right. It's now evident in all facets of it. We're talking about the music industry today, but you see the same evidence of the hidden hand in the Hollywood movie industry. You see it in the television industry, and you've now started seeing it in big sports, the big sporting games. And you've started seeing it in the fashion industry as well. My wife had a catalogue for this company called Avon land on the doormat the other day. And over here in the UK, they do makeup, cosmetics and stuff. And on the front cover of this magazine is a model promoting lipstick, but for some reason she's got her hand over her eye like this. Exactly the same signs that you see with Rihanna and Beyonce and all your favourite music artists. Why would that be? This goes beyond the realms of coincidence. People make all kinds of excuses and justifications for why these things keep cropping up. They say, oh, it's just to look cool, it's just to look fashionable, it's just a coincidence, they're all copying each other, they're just doing it to be controversial, to make money. There's only so far that you can justify this with these kind of excuses, I would say. And, all this stuff goes way beyond the realms of coincidence. And I remember when I was a young lad growing up, my old dad said to me, there's no such thing as a free lunch. It used to come with simple truths. Well, still does. And it's a very simple concept. You don't get anything for nothing in this world. And so if you see someone who is rich and famous, who is enjoying a celebrity lifestyle, who's up there on a platform, who is being worshipped and revered and adored by millions of people, there's been a price to pay. You don't get that for nothing. And the price that these individuals pay to get to that level is, in my view, getting higher and higher. And it's always had to be paid. There's a lot of corruption and there's a lot of compromising that goes on in exchange for these artists to get to these positions. And years before I woke up and, my consciousness was activated, when I was still a walking mindless robot just going through the motions, as most people still do in this world. I was a DJ, I've been a DJ for 25 years, and in the years when I was coming up in the game, the thing I wanted more than anything else was to be on a big BBC radio station over here in the UK called Radio 1, which is like the principal pop music station, has been for 50 odd years. And they've also got a spin-off station now for black music, which is known as 1Extra. And I so wanted to be on those stations more than anything else in the world. And I used to send up demo CDs, I used to call the station, I used to turn up at events and try and do networking and get to know the right people, because I was hungry for that level of success. I never made it onto those stations, and I'm looking back on it now in retrospect, and I'm thinking it's the best thing that never happened to me. And when you come to a true understanding of what is required of you and the price that you have to pay for real fame and fortune, you realise that the best thing that can ever happen to you is not making it big. That way you can retain your humanity and your dignity and your soul. And that's what it comes down to.
Yes, it really does. I actually, well, I want to take this to a personal level, but I was quite interested in my degree is in theater with a lot of other stuff that surrounds it. I mean, there's a lot involved, everything from voice work to fencing to, just everything that goes with it. Writing plays, directing plays, this and that. And I really thought wow, wouldn't it be great to be in there and tell some great stories and so forth? But as time went by, I became disenchanted with that whole apparatus. And if there are to be any films made, then there'll be independent films. They won't be mainstream films at all. I mean, I think Clint Eastwood actually comes the closest to doing his own thing, and he must be connected in some way, or he would have had, he would not have realized the success that he did. That stated, though, I mean, he went through all of this stuff back then. Clint Eastwood started in the Rawhide days as this character named Rowdy, and then as time went on, I mean, he had to take it to Sergio Leone and do his what we call the spaghetti westerns. Yeah. And then when they caught on, it's like, well, we can't really stop it, so we might as well roll with it. But Clint strikes me as a guy who's always been his own man. He's a conservative as far as his politics are concerned. And he's managed to go on. But they were saying he couldn't act, and his Adam's apple was too big, and the guy just sucks, and everything else. And well, I guess they were wrong. He's not the greatest actor, but he does tell really good stories, and people like him, I think, because he's an individual, and he hasn't succumbed to the studio mentality. So I think it's great. Anyway, that's kind of a side note. But anyway, I've never seen him flash the Illuminati eye.
Well, he's an interesting guy, certainly, but I was a bit disappointed to see him come with American Sniper recently, because, as you pointed out, he's made some great independent films, and he does seem to have had quite a bit of independent editorial control over the type of movies that he makes. But, American Sniper, to me, was just pushing the official establishment line on war and on the military and how it's necessary to have military order followers that go out to foreign lands and defend America's honor and all this BS, and murder people. And
I think it's one of the greatest anti-war films.
Do it with impunity.
Mark, I think it's one of the greatest anti-war films ever made. What it is to me is that, just like we were talking with this young man, Adam Kokesh, yesterday, and I said, why did you join the Marines only to become an activist later, effectively, is what I was asking him. And he said, because he bought into the narrative. He thought that he was fighting for, the American way. And then as he stayed in there, he realized this is crazy. And to me, American Sniper is that, you're sent by a guy you don't know to go out and shoot a bunch of other people that you don't know, as Lefty said in Donnie Brasco. And the Army, it ain't nothing like the Army. In the Army, you go out to shoot a guy you don't know, and you were sent to shoot him by another guy that you don't know. And to me, it's like, this is what happens. This man's put in the position of being a wonderful marksman. He's killed all these people, and his life is destroyed. And that's what war is all about. So I don't know. I've just got a different take on it, but maybe that's just me.
Well, no, I can understand that viewpoint of it, but I think you could also see it as a kind of propaganda piece. It depends on your perspectives, I guess. But the most hilarious aspect of that movie for me was when he's watching the 9/11 attacks on TV, and he's horrified by it, and he says, "I've got to go and fight for America and get the guys that did this." They're right there, man. They're right there in your own country. You don't need to go overseas for it. Look at how he was duped into believing that Muslim terrorists were the bad guys that he's now got to go out and kill, when he didn't need to look any further than right there at home, certain factions of it.
Yeah, but it's taken the better part of a decade for people to even fully grasp the concept that their own government has been doing this for a long time. Yeah. Mark, I got to tell you, on 12/21/2012, I really think that's when the awakening began. Perhaps it's just a happy coincidence, or maybe there was really something to that whole Mayan calendar running out. But there's been more exposed about international banking cartels, their control of governments, the falseness of warfare, the false patriotic narrative that's been put out there. I mean, look at all certainly you must have seen this, all these people for about 2 weeks after 9/11, they're all flying American flags off of their cars, and gradually they went away. And then how many years have we been there now? 12? Yeah, 12 years last month. Stupid. So, people are slow to catch on. They really are. I mean, when you're just continually bombarded. And look, I'm not making excuses for them. I'm just saying that the behavior that we see in society and the mentality that we have, it's not entirely their fault, except that they screwed up and they trusted their leaders leaders to tell them the truth
yeah.
about anything.
I see that.
I mean, if you don't have a virtuous leader, how can you have a virtuous country?
That's right. And I bear in mind the fact that in 2001, September 11th, 2001, I was the same as the rest of the world. I swallowed the official story hook, line and sinker. And I looked to Osama bin Laden as the bad guy, as we were all instructed to do. And it took me many years to question the official narrative. So absolutely, you know, I was with everyone else in that. We were all duped. And, you know, you come to wake up in the end. But you've got to bear in mind that we were all taken in, and with very few exceptions, many of us spent significant portions of our lives believing that the world was exactly the way it's presented to us by CNN and Fox and governments, you know.
Yeah. Well, I'm not trying to do that prisoner thing where they're going, I. You know, every time he said I, they're I. Because I is not good. But I got to tell you, I never bought the Kennedy assassination story, not even as a child in elementary school. Never bought it, ever. I did not. The moment that I heard that the bin Laden family had been put on Gulf Streams or whatever and spirited out of the country immediately after the attacks, I thought, isn't that the same bin Laden who ran the Mujahideen? This is Bravo Sierra is what this is. I never bought it. I never flew an American flag off of my car. I criticized New York's mayor for being nothing but a prig and a prat. I combined it and made it a prag. A stupid person who just blusters over trivia, and then would not allow a clergyman at the ceremony to pray for their souls because that might be politically incorrect. That might offend some Muslim or something somewhere. Well, we just can't have that. I think the whole thing is rubbish, and I've said this many times. I do support our troops. I support them in this way. I don't want them used as mercenaries. I resent and despise and loathe those who do. There, I. Sorry.
Okay.
Carry on.
No, we digress, but it's good to do that sometimes. We make
we
some
don't
good
digress,
points
we just
that way.
diverge for a minute.
We make some good points.
Yeah.
Where were we?
So anyway, carry on. Take us anywhere you want to go. I'll try and stay out of your way, but I can't guarantee I will.
Okay. Well, yeah, the true nature of the entertainment business and the price that is paid to get to the top. I'm coming to the US in a couple of days, actually. I'm going to be at the Free Your Mind conference in Philadelphia this coming Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And on the way in on Thursday, I've arranged to meet with Professor Griff of Public Enemy in New York City. And I know Griff was one of your previous guests. I listened to your show with him, and you were talking about this kind of stuff when he was on. And I'm looking forward to getting into a conversation with him about the true nature of the price that is to be paid to make it big in the game. But there are some videos that people can watch on YouTube by a couple of prominent comedians that have figured out what's going on and have bravely spoken out about it. One of them is Dave Chappelle, who people might remember had a primetime TV comedy show a few years ago. And then he just quit, didn't renew his contract, took off to Africa for a long time to clear his head and get himself straight. And people were asking all kinds of questions, like what's happened to Dave Chappelle? Has he gone a little bit crazy? And when he tells his story, you realise that he didn't go crazy. He just realised that the world around him is. And he talks about some of the initiation rituals that are required of Hollywood actors and TV stars and people like that. And he gives examples of specifically what is required of black males, such as himself, to become successful. And he talks about the fact that with very few exceptions, any black male that has become rich and famous and successful in Hollywood or in TV or in music or in comedy has been required to kind of humiliate and degrade themselves by dressing up in women's clothes. Might sound ridiculous, but you can look at all the examples and you realise that he's spot on with it. In all these movies, whether it's Eddie Murphy or Martin Lawrence or whoever else, they've all had to dress up as women and drag up, you know. And he is of the view that it's part of a routine of sort of humiliation and emasculating these guys as part of what's required to make it big. Another comedian whose videos you can see online talking in much greater graphic detail about some of the stuff that goes on is Cat Williams, who woke up to the true nature of the industry himself a few years ago. And there's YouTube videos which people have added very creatively some footage to, where he's talking about all these sick, depraved ritual sex parties, orgies, that celebrities are required to attend and participate in. And if anyone's seen the movie Eyes Wide Shut, the Stanley Kubrick classic, his last film, the depictions of the orgy that's going on at the mansion there, which was a Rothschild mansion, by all accounts. It was filmed at one of the Rothschilds' country retreats. There's a surprise. Weekend with the Rothschilds. So all this stuff you see going on in that orgy is, by many accounts, what actually goes on behind closed doors in Hollywood and the entertainment industry. And for you to become famous and successful, you are required to take part in this debauchery and hedonism, and according to Cat Williams and others, it's all manner of sexual activity that you can imagine. It may involve children, it may involve animals, it's deeply sick stuff. And yet there are accounts from insiders and whistleblowers of this type of thing going on. And again, it's a way of corrupting and compromising these artists and getting them to degrade themselves and getting them to absolutely go along with the agenda that's been set for them. And you get the same thing in the world of politics as well. There are a great many researchers in that side of things that have uncovered some of the unsavoury activities that our politicians get up to. And over here in the UK, in recent months, we've had a big scandal about parliamentary paedophilia. It's still going on now. Revelations in the mainstream press. This is out of the realms of the alternative. This has been in the UK's Daily Mail and on the BBC News and such. The vast number of politicians here in the UK who just happen to have been exposed as grotesque paedophiles. With many of them, it doesn't come out until after they've conveniently died, it has to be said. There was the whole scandal with Jimmy Savile, which people might be aware of, and his connections with politics and with royalty. Goes all the way to the top. None of that came out until after Savile had died. There were revelations about this big fat MP called Cyril Smith, who was a serial paedophile and child abuser. None of that came out until after his death. There was a scandal involving a Tory minister from the 1980s, from Margaret Thatcher's cabinet, called Leon Britton. And he is supposed to have been handed a dossier detailing the huge number of paedophiles and sexual deviants that were in Margaret Thatcher's serving cabinet. And he apparently lost the file. Went missing, as these things do. And Leon Britton, when the heat started to come on that whole story earlier this year, just happened to die of cancer. So he's now out of the picture, and revelations have now come forward about his own paedophilic activity. So you get it in the world of politics as well. And so many of these politicians have these dirty, dark little secrets. There are all kinds of allegations about Tony Blair. Many researchers claim that Tony Blair was a cross-dresser, and he was into all kinds of interesting sexual activity. That was covered up as far as the mainstream is concerned, although the alternative media uncovered it. And you've got to ask yourself, why was Tony Blair selected to be UK Prime Minister for 10 years? What little secret did the establishment have on him? What is it that he would not have wanted to come to light if he didn't play ball and do what was required of him? And you hear these kind of accusations about all kinds of political leaders all over the world. There's stuff about Obama, I don't need to tell you, that people are claiming, and about his past. And
what do you mean, like he's gay, for example?
Well, exactly, his private life, and Michelle not necessarily being all she is cracked up to be.
The first lad, you mean?
The first lad, exactly. people have heard all this, and there's a reason why certain figures make it big in politics, because they've been compromised, they've got grubby little secrets, and the establishment are well aware of this. There's a reason why artists become prominent singers, prominent rappers, prominent Hollywood actors. They're the ones that have gone along with the agenda, or they're the ones that they've got something on. Many of these elite sex parties and orgies that I mentioned, according to reports, they are filmed. And these individuals are filmed in these compromising positions, and the footage is retained, and they are effectively blackmailed into doing whatever's required of them, and if they don't, then the footage gets out there, which is something they wouldn't want. That's the way they get so many of these people on board.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Mark. Carry on, and I'll pick up some points.
Yeah, and this is just the way that the world of politics and the world of entertainment are linked, and it goes into all other walks of life as well. The sporting industry, for instance, as you mentioned. They use the same tactics, and they use the same agenda in all these different walks of life, because the individuals that we're talking about operating through these secret societies, steeped in dark occult practices, run every aspect of daily human life. So that's banking, that's politics, that's the academic educational establishments, it's all the big corporations, it's the entertainment business, and all of that. At the end of the show, I want to get on to some positive, kind of inspiring messages about how we can change this, and how it doesn't have to be like this. So I don't want to, put a downer on the whole thing by pointing this out and then saying we're all doomed, we're all screwed,
Well, we're proper screwed if we don't untwist this, untie this knot.
Yeah.
That the ends of the rope are being pulled and the knot's getting tighter and tighter. But look, we've left out Jeffrey Epstein and his private island. I mean, here's some things. Here's a little food for thought, folks. Do we think that nobody in the mob ever took any films of J. Edgar Hoover dressed up in women's clothes? Do we think, and we had a guest on the program recently, I wish I could call his name at this moment, but I can't, and he said that Kubrick routinely made Tom Cruise do all kinds of, self-deprecating things, such as dress up in women's clothes and stilettos and prance around the sets, made him do these things. Now, that's what our guest claimed. I wasn't there. I didn't see this. And now we have Jeffrey Epstein, who... it's been revealed through reports that his little private island home down there, where he hosted underage, younger than 18, don't tell them how young they were. Stephanopoulos is alleged to have been on his jet before. Bill Clinton, Katie Couric, and of course the renowned scientist, Mr. Dr. I himself, Lawrence Krauss, was who identifies himself as a scientist, even though he's a theoretical physicist. That there's a contradiction in terms there. They've all been guests down there, and then it was revealed that there are cameras all over the house. So do we think that Mr. Devlin is correct or not? Of course, this is how these people get under their thumb and in the pockets of those who are running things. They misuse their pathetic little genitals, and their predilections become recorded on film, videotape, and hard drive. And then they do exactly what they're told to from now on. How much faith would this country have had in the FBI if you could see J. Edgar Hoover dancing a jig in petticoats, or maybe in one of those old-fashioned laced up girdles, or what do you call it, a corset? I'm looking for the word corset. I mean, the credibility would go right straight down the toilet. So there you have it. Keep going, Mark.
Yeah. Well, another thing is the annual gathering at Bohemian Grove, of course, in California,
yes,
which I think is July, so not too long to wait for this year's. And that's where all the rich and famous and powerful and elite, apparently, of this world go to gather in this redwood forest in the dead of night and dress up in robes and probably take the robes off at some point and, dance around a fire in this ritual known as cremation of care in front of this 40-foot stone owl, which is supposed to be a depiction of Moloch, this demonic entity that we encountered earlier. And there have been so many pictures of rich, famous, powerful, influential people attending Bohemian Grove. There's a famous one from 1957, I think it is, with Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan in the same picture. And what a coincidence that both these guys just happened to go on to become US presidents. That's another way that they compromise people and get them to play ball. They go to these sick, twisted, strange gatherings. Who knows what goes on there? But, people might like to reflect. Do you like to think of people that are running your country and deciding who you go to war with? Do you like to think of them dressing up in robes and dancing around fires, around lakes, in front of 40-foot stone owls in the middle of the night? Is that a thought that makes you comfortable? Because believe that is what goes on. And the heads of all these big corporations are doing it as well. It's part of the initiation. It's part of the requirement for entry into the upper levels of the establishment.
Yeah, I don't think they'd get much. I don't think they'd get much play out of these revelations of their activities coming to the fore for the public to digest, unless, of course, they can push the public into a state of such degeneration morally that the public embraces it.
Or they just don't care.
Well, Mark, if they really didn't care, they wouldn't be so secretive about it. But I'm thinking that they're well on their way to turning into this, going to your point, that the public doesn't care. Because it's like, we know you're dirty, but you know what? We're dirty too. So we can work together. We can do each other favors. We can make some accommodations for each other. It's all about making money. It's all about give and take. I mean, it is satanic at its roots. If it's not satanic, it'll certainly do until the Satanism gets here.
Well, yeah. Just to pick up on your point about Jeffrey Epstein as well, of course, another of his famous associates was Prince Andrew of... Yeah. I would call them the British royal family, but they're all German, so we should call them the German royal family, really, when you do the ancestry. But yeah, Prince Andrew was closely associated with Jeffrey Epstein. That hit the headlines here in the UK a few weeks ago, and it was very quickly hushed up. Andrew officially made an announcement, or Buckingham Palace on his behalf made an announcement to say that the suggestions that he was involved in these kinky sex parties with underage girls were absolutely untrue. So that's the end of it then. Sorted. That seems to be enough for most people in the general public. Oh, well, Buckingham Palace says it's not true, so that's that then. But of course, there were people in the alternative media that were asking a lot of questions about the nature of these liaisons, and many of us have known for a long time that the royal family are absolutely up to their necks in all this filth and corruption and depravity that we're seeing coming out now. Everything that you see politicians involved with and everything that you see famous celebrities involved with, best believe that the royal family are right in there as well. So no great surprise to many of us when these revelations about Andrew came out. But interestingly, whenever things start to heat up a little bit, where it concerns the royal family, something always happens to come along in the headlines to eclipse it and to make everybody forget all about it and start talking about something else. We had the Germanwings plane crash the other week, which has got everybody looking the other way. And there are many other stories that have done that as well. And now the headlines are no longer on Prince Andrew's case, and it's all been kind of hushed up. We don't talk about that anymore. So interesting how they managed to keep the heat off.
And I'm not suggesting that they did, Mike, but it's like if people think that governments don't sacrifice a couple of hundred people to keep the government from being brought down, we'll think again. They do it all the time. They'll whack out 500 people as quickly and easily as they would, as we say, hit the head.
Well, yeah. So, yeah. I don't know the actual ins and outs and the nuts and bolts of that particular story. I've not been able to establish how genuine it's been, but, anything remains possible. But just making the point of how the British general public have just let these revelations go away. You know, the Jimmy Savile thing, people were shocked when those revelations came out. And there were suggestions there of politicians being involved, the royal family having close links with Jimmy Savile. There should have been an absolute public outcry. There should have been mass non-compliance among the British general public with the BBC, who employed Savile for about 50 years. And Savile was abusing children on taxpayer-funded BBC premises that these people are paying for via this television licence extortion that we have over here, this tax that is just taken from us, and if you don't pay it, you go to jail. You know, there should have been a mass refusal to continue paying the TV licence, but there wasn't. And
you go to jail if you don't pay it?
You can go to jail. You go to jail if you don't pay your council tax. Exactly. It is a TV tax. You have to pay to watch TV. If you say you're not going to pay, they can send the bailiffs round to strip your house of all your assets, and in a worst-case scenario, you can go to jail. Anyone that thinks that Britain is a free society, think again. So, you know, people have just put up with this, and they've not rebelled, and they've not come together in mass non-compliance. And it just makes you wonder what it's going to take and how much people are prepared to put up with. And there was a great meme on Facebook the other day. Some of these are so telling. Just a picture of Nixon, and the caption read, "Wiretapped a hotel room, impeachment proceedings." Next to it was a picture of Obama, and it says, "Wiretapped the entire nation, no one effing cares." And I thought that was so telling of
pretty good.
Where we're at right now. You know, again, yes. I don't want to put a doom-laden negative thing on what we're talking about here, because we are going to get on to more positive aspects. But, you know, a lot of work needs to be done, and there's still a long way to go to overcome what's being done to us.
Well, there seems to be no influence these people. They just go on forever. And in fact, it's been rumored that Gore, Bush, and Blair are all related.
Yeah, indeed.
So it's the same families, century after century after century. Strange.
And a very interesting one, which you may have come across before. Very strong suggestions that George W. Bush, Bush Jr., Village Idiot Bush, is actually the grandson of Aleister Crowley, the famous British dark occultist, Satanist. And the idea is that Barbara Bush, George H.W.'s wife and Junior's mother, is the illegitimate child of Aleister Crowley. There's a lot of credibility to that suggestion. I think Freeman is one of the researchers that's put that out there. But you look at a picture of Barbara Bush and a picture of Aleister Crowley, side by side. Definite family resemblance. Definitely a possibility.
That's extraordinary. I mean, just when you think you've heard it all, you find out you haven't. It's amazing. Yeah.
Worth looking into, that one.
Yes, it is. You read my mind. I can think of a few programs that won't touch this with a 10-foot pole. We will. But,
good for you.
Yeah, we must. All right, then.
Oh, and also, I'll just throw this in there. How many people knew that David Cameron, British Prime Minister, is a cousin of the Queen of England / Germany? You know, they are related. What a coincidence that he just happens to be Prime Minister and he's genetically related to the Queen. Of all the people that could have made it up through the system and, you know, worked their way up through the ranks, it just happens to be David Cameron. And we've got a general election over here next month, and I wonder if he'll get back in for a second term. I wonder. It would already have been decided.
Probably a pretty good chance. And who was in there before him? Brown, was it?
Yeah, Gordon Brown hardly distinguished himself with the most colourful political career, did he, really?
No, not really.
He's about as exciting.
He's just over with, isn't he?
Oh, yeah, finished. You've not heard a word from him from the day he walked out of 10 Downing Street. You know, he was about as exciting as a wet carrier bag blowing around in the gutter on a rainy Monday morning. Really.
A wet carrier bag blowing around in the gutter on a what morning?
On a wet Monday morning in January,
Right.
let's say.
Man, that's amazing. What about your book?
My book?
Yes.
Well, my book is in production at the moment, or it's being written at the moment, I should say. I estimate that I'm about 2/3 of the way through it. It's going to be pretty big. You know, there's many, many thousands of words in there already. And I'm going to call it Musical Truth, because it's combining the two things that interest me the most in the world, music and truth. So, straightforward, that's the title. And it's bringing together all my findings so far as to the true nature of the corporate music business and what goes on, and the mind control and social engineering aspects of it. All the stuff that I've spoken about in my public presentation so far, all the stuff that I've spoken about in radio appearances such as this, is all going to go in the book. So I'm estimating that's going to be out early 2016. You know, there's a way to go still, but I'm going to be self-publishing that. And it's going to shock a lot of people, because there's a lot of people out there that I've met over the years as a DJ who are maybe fellow DJs or associates or people that I've met through the music industry in some capacity or other. And when they read what I'm going to put into this book, they are going to be shocked. And many people will doubtless think I've lost the plot. Many people will doubtless think that I'm insane. But to the best of my understanding, what's going into that book is truth. And truth needs to be spoken into power, fearlessly, and I've reached the point now where I'm happy to do that. And,
excellent.
You know, there are things that need to be said, and they're going to be said. So it's going to come out next year.
I love this. I like to call him Mark Steele Core. Mark, let me ask you this, just by way of a recapitulation. What was was there the aha moment when you went from just having fun and playing your music and doing your gigs and that stuff, and then you went, there's something wrong with this, and you started looking. Just bring us back to that point when you decided to engage in this work that you do now.
Well, there was no eureka moment for me, really. I can't point to a moment of epiphany where it all suddenly started making sense. What it was a gradual process. And it was within the context of me looking into what was really going on in the wider world. And it was later that I was able to slot what happens in the music business into the big picture of what's going on further afield. And it was as a result of many years of asking questions, really, about the big, important things in life. It was many years of reading lots of different authors. Got to give credit to my dad, because he always encouraged me to be an open-minded thinker, as he was himself. He was reading books by Erich von Däniken back in the late 60s, when nobody else that he knew was. And he got, the mickey taken out of him. He got ribbed for that by his colleagues at work, because they thought he'd lost his mind, So he always kind of inspired me and taught me that it's okay to ask questions, and it's okay to be doing things that other people aren't. It's okay to go your own path. So I started reading lots of different books myself from quite an early age. One of the ones that really blew my mind was Graham Hancock's Fingerprints of the Gods. And I started reading books by David Icke and many other people as well. And by about 2008, I'd started realising that all was not as it was presented to us in the world. I think by 2008 I'd finally woken up to 9/11 truth, and I'd finally realised that 9/11 did not happen the way we were told it did. And that leads you down a very big rabbit hole, to coin a well-worn phrase. And you think to yourself, well, if we've been lied to about that, and if that single event has changed the world for so many people in such a major way, then what else are we being lied to about? And it was 2010 when I finally woke up, I would say, and a sort of light bulb went off in my head, and it shed light on so many things that had previously remained hidden. And I had to go through a very difficult process of deep introspective work on myself to come to terms with how the music business that I'd been a part of and how the music that I loved and the genre that I was associated with and many of the artists that I revered were being used and manipulated as part of a very dark agenda that was leading humanity into a very sinister place. And it was difficult because I think back to the way I used to look at artists like Jay-Z, who we mentioned earlier. I mean, Jay-Z is the best example there is of a corrupted hip-hop artist and one who is absolutely doing the work of his controllers. And I always looked up to him and respected him as a lyricist. I thought he was a great MC. I mean, he still is. He's a very gifted lyricist, and that's the reason why he was selected for that position. You know, not all these artists have talent. A lot of them don't, but some of them do, and that's the reason why they're put up there. So for me to come to terms with the fact that Jay-Z was being used in this way. Dr. Dre was another one. Dr. Dre was a hip-hop producer whose music I loved in the early mid-90s. I thought he was an incredible producer, but I grudgingly had to look at the way in which he'd been used in this agenda. P. Diddy, a.k.a. Puff Daddy, a.k.a. Sean Combs, whatever the hell he's calling himself this week, is another one, who was the producer for Notorious B.I.G., and the guy that put Biggie Smalls' Notorious B.I.G. on the map, is very, very, very heavily a part of this agenda. The way you can find out the ones that mainly are is to look at the Forbes Rich List of hip-hop, because they do a hip-hop version of it. And in the top 3 of that, over the past God knows how many years, has been Puff Daddy, Dr. Dre, and Jay-Z. So if these 3 names are at the very top of that list, they're the ones that are doing the work. They're the ones that are obeying their orders. And, you know, you look at somebody like Jay-Z. There's always going to be a number 1 position available in the hip-hop game for the most prominent rapper. And it just happens to be Jay-Z. And it just happens to have been Jay-Z for many, many years. If it wasn't Jay-Z, it would be somebody else. Nobody need think that he's there on the basis of his talent, on the basis of how hard he worked. He's there because he was placed there. Same thing in the R&B world. You have Beyonce and Rihanna, and if it wasn't them, it would be 2 other puppets. It just happens to be them because they were available at the time and they were manoeuvred into place. You could say the same thing about politics. You know, Obama is there because he was selected, and you hear that presidents are selected, not elected. All these people are shuffled into place. So it was a gradual understanding of how all this works and how it all fits together. And I just had to go with it because I'm someone that's always looked for truth through my life. And as we all know, the truth is so often uncomfortable and inconvenient, and we so wish it could be another way. But it's either the truth or it's not. And there are 2 types of people in the world. There are people that want truth and will go wherever it takes them, however unsettling it may be, because they need to know, they have to know, and there are people that don't. That's what it comes down to. And I'm someone that wants truth, and I have to go where it takes me.
And you know, you seem like you're a very serious guy. And I noticed that
it's been said.
Well, yeah, I'll restate the obvious, but you're looking for that, or willing at least to find a bright spot and say, you know, it's not all gloom and doom. Well, folks, you know, and the Caravanners know this. It is mostly gloom and doom. You get a gloom and doom mindset when you realize that virtually everything that you've been told, taught, and from the schools to the entertainment that you love, to the food that you eat, to the wars that you fight, to the economic system you support, to the products that you buy. It's all because of a manipulation. Yep. There wasn't any free will to it. You were conditioned to do it. The bright spot will come when the heinous leaders are gone, when a wall is erected that has their names etched deeply into it so they may be remembered for centuries in shame so that it does not happen again. And when we find out that, wow, you mean we can still have a good time, we can enjoy ourselves, and we can get rid of all this corruption, and still we'll be regular people. We won't walk around like self-righteous robots that just know the truth and we reject all these things that are bad. Look how people who wanted to do good were vilified. They call them Dudley Do-Rights and so forth. Well, even making a case could be made for even contriving a character and naming it Dudley Do-Right makes a mockery of those who try to do the right thing.
Goody Two-Shoes is the other one.
And the wrong way to do things. Sorry?
Goody Two-Shoes is the other one.
Yeah. Exactly. You know, Kanye West has escaped our scrutiny in this conversation so far.
Not for long.
I wonder if he's having a fit of conscience with his lyrics about having sold his soul to the devil and all of this. What about Kanye?
Kanye is a fascinating character to look into. There's so much to talk about with him. He's the ultimate example of a good artist gone bad in my book, and I use his case as an example in many of my public talks of how they take an artist that has potential to uplift and inspire people and make conscious music and affect people in a really positive way, and they just degrade them and debase them and send them off down this path of negativity. So when Kanye first started out, he was a producer. He produced beats for the likes of Jay-Z and many of the artists on the Rockefeller record label. And he got to the point where he decided he wanted to become an artist himself. He said he always had rapping skills and he wanted to make an album and put himself out there as an artist, not just a producer. And his first album came out in 2003. It was called The College Dropout, and it was a great album. It was a modern hip-hop classic, and there were some great songs on there. The one which I usually cite as an example of positive lyricism is the track All Falls Down. And in this track, he's got the lyric, "The prettiest people do the ugliest things, on the road to riches and diamond rings." And there's some truth in those lines right there. And it's, an expose of what goes on in the industry. And so a few years down the line, what do we see? But we see Kanye making exactly the kind of music, talking about exactly the kind of lyrical content that earlier lyric would appear to be criticising. He's now making completely garbage music with degraded, negative lyrics, just talking about the same old BS that everyone else is in hip-hop, talking about gold chains and expensive watches and champagne and up in the club with girls with fat butts, and strip clubs and just nonsense, just straight garbage. And also the style of his music has changed as well. The production style now, it's all grating electronic beats that just don't make you feel good, because sound vibration, sound frequencies have an effect on your moods and your emotions and how it makes you feel. We're back to vibrational energy again. And if the vibrational energy of a sound recording is not vibing and not syncing with the natural functions and the natural energetic construct of the human body, there's going to be discordance there. There's going to be dissonance. It's going to make you feel not good. And so that's what's happening with a lot of this music. And Kanye put out this album called 808s and Heartbreaks in 2008, which was an auto-tune album. And you get me started on auto-tune and we could be here for quite a long time. Auto-tune is this horrible, disgraceful method of production where they plug a software unit into the human voice, the singer's voice, and it makes them sound like a robot. And they just sound completely artificial, completely electronic, and it's been all over popular music and so-called hip-hop, so-called R&B since 2008, and we still hear it out there now. It sounds terrible, nobody likes it, why is it still out there? We can get into the reasons for that later on if we have time. It's all linked to the transhumanist agenda, which is another facet of what these powers that shouldn't be are trying to do to us. But yeah, just sticking with Kanye, 808s and Heartbreaks was released in the wake of the death of his mother. Kanye was famously very close to his mother, Donda. He dedicated a track to her on his second album, and he was, very, very much into his mother. And his mother died very suddenly when she was apparently undergoing some type of cosmetic surgery. She died on the surgeon's table. And Kanye was devastated by this, or was said to be completely cut up about it. And 808s and Heartbreak, which is this album absolutely drenched in this horrible, grating electronic auto-tune, was partly his reaction to coming to terms with his mother's death. And also that same year he split with his fiancée at pretty much the same time as this happened. So that album is a very dark journey into his mind. And there are also suggestions from many researchers that Kanye may actually be a victim of mind control himself. I've come to realise that many A-list artists, many famous household name celebrities, are actually victims of trauma-based mind control, which is this very dark, murky kind of world that is linked to the entertainment business. There are suggestions that Kanye may, have undergone some of that himself. And as you say, he's made certain veiled sort of references in some of his lyrics. He said in a freestyle at one of his concerts, he said something along the lines of, I sold my soul for a Happy Meal. It was a crappy deal. I sold my soul to the devil. And he's made various other veiled references to the price that he's had to pay for his fame. And, it's just a shame to see what an uplifting and inspiring artist he could have been, that there was potential for in his early days, and what he now is. He's just... Obama himself called him a jackass publicly. And unfortunately he is. He's a clown, he's a joker, he's making garbage music, he's an absolute puppet and stooge of the industry, and it's tragic to see. But then again, there's the truth.
Well, that's rough. It really is. Poor man.
Yeah.
All right. Well, now let's talk about a couple of other things. Let's go even darker. The MK Ultra trauma-based mind conditioning, the mind control that has been linked to the music industry. This MK Ultra is a real thing, and too many people have talked about it, exposed it, and researched it, and then brought it forward. But I can tell you that people will come onto certain programs and they will they'll touch on it, but they don't go very deep into it because, well, that's not wanted in mainstream media. So what about the trauma-based conditioning? Trauma-based, like beaten into submission. Trauma-based. Is that what we mean?
Well, there's many different forms of mind control. There's mass mind control, which is done to all of us on a daily basis, and you see that in things like advertising. You watch a TV ad or a cinema ad, and that's mass mind control. It's manipulating your thoughts without you realising, because it's always targeted at the subliminal mind, operating below the threshold of consciousness. But this particular brand of it is known as trauma-based mind control, because it's just that. It's done on an individual one-to-one basis, and the victim is subjected to horrific levels of trauma. And this can involve many things. It can involve being exposed to something that's terrible to witness, like somebody being raped, like somebody being tortured, a child being sexually abused, an animal being mutilated maybe. Horrific stuff. It can also involve electroshock and various other methods of torture, and it can involve mind-altering hallucinogenic drugs. And you have MK Ultra, which is kind of a catch-all term, a catch-all brand for these various methods of mind control, which were perpetuated by the CIA in its early years and going on through the decades. And MK Ultra originated when a whole bunch of Nazi scientists that had been a part of Nazi Germany were covertly brought over to the US at the end of the Second World War as part of a program called Operation Paperclip. They should have stood trial for war crimes, but instead they were put to work in the US in various secret establishments on certain programs to continue the work that they've been doing in Nazi Germany. And it remains unclear whether this was done on a friendly kind of cooperative basis, or whether they were forced to do this to avoid, answering to justice. But either way, You had MKUltra, this program which grew up out of the early years of the CIA, and a major part of it involved the mind control of individuals to program them as assassins. And it's the sort of thing that we saw in the movie The Manchurian Candidate, the 1962 version, as opposed to the modern remake, which is far superior. And you see a depiction there of a kind of US military subject who has undergone these mind control treatments and is now programmed as an assassin. And there's a trigger phrase or a trigger word which, when they hear it, they click into this dissociative identity of their mind and they become this alternative personality temporarily and carry out what they've been programmed to do, which in the case of that movie was to commit an assassination. And when they've completed their task, they click back into their normal, regular state of mind, or as normal as they can now be, and they carry on being the person that you associate with in everyday life. There's a division of MKUltra which is known as Monarch Programming, and this is the one that we've seen rolled out in the entertainment business over the decades. It's absolutely rife in Hollywood, from what we hear. People might have seen some videos of Roseanne Barr, the actress, who has exposed the use of MKUltra and Monarch programming in the world of Hollywood movies, or Hollyweird, as we call it, La La Land. And, of course, it's completely prevalent throughout the music business as well. And this involves taking subjects when they're very young, usually, when they're still children, and subjecting them to these horrific levels of trauma. And it was discovered not only in Nazi Germany, but going back into ancient civilizations. You go back to the ancient world, and there's accounts of Egypt and Babylon and all these other civilizations having carried out mind control experiments to study what happens to the human mind when it undergoes horrific levels of trauma that it just can't deal with. And what they discovered is that the human mind basically fractures and shatters into different compartments to deal with the trauma. It attempts to lock it away into different compartments of the mind that it's created so that the trauma doesn't have to be dealt with and processed at face value. It's known as dissociative identity disorder because you're dissociating from reality. And this is what they're doing to many of these young people, that they're grooming to be stars, whether it's musicians, singers, actors, whatever. And they're causing them to fracture their minds and to have these different personalities which can then be programmed. And they can then trigger each of these personalities at will by way of a trigger phrase or a word, or it might be a piece of music, or it might be a visual trigger, a pattern or something that they see, which causes this programmed alter, it's known as, because it's altered reality, to come into play. There are many examples in the music business of artists that would appear to be victims of this level of programming. There's a great website which I always mention called Vigilant Citizen, vigilantcitizen.com, which goes in great detail into some of the symbolism that is put into music videos and stage shows and publicity shots and all that sort of thing to indicate the presence of mind control and to give you some kind of clue as to which artists are a part of this agenda. I'd like to get into the reasons why they do that a bit later on as well. It's probably best to leave that to another part of the conversation. People might ask, why would they let you know what they're doing? Why would they put these symbols into videos if they want to keep it secret? There's some very good reasons as to why they do that. But Vigilant Citizen gives some examples of artists that would appear to be down with this agenda. Some of the ones where there's little room for doubt include Britney Spears, Nicki Minaj, Lil Wayne, Mariah Carey, Michael Jackson, and there's a question mark hanging over a few others. Kanye West, for example, possibly may have been subjected to this. Miley Cyrus is another classic, as is Katy Perry, as is Lady Gaga. So some big names here. We're talking the biggest names in the industry. Very strong suggestions and very strong evidence to suggest that they've undergone trauma-based mind control.
Oh boy.
Shall we go into some of the symbols?
Oh, I think we should. Yeah, I was just sort of grappling momentarily with really how deep all of this has run, and for